I bought the cheapest leather boots you can buy on Amazon, $7.99 for these bad boys. And we're gonna cut them in half and see kind of what's inside of them and how they're structured and if this is really leather and how you can even get a boot on Amazon Prime for $7.99. So, and I like doing these kind of videos because it really shows some of the big flaws with this mass-produced fast fashion industry, that people assume that you're getting a decent quality boot for a really cheap price, but a lot of times you get a really horrible boot and you waste your money. So we'll cut them in half and see if that's true and see what kind of leather this actually is, because it does not look like leather. So now let's go over the boot information. So the brand is the Queensbury London, and this box came like this, kind of beat up. The style is the Albert Office Smart Work Business Leather Ankle Boot. The color is the tan suede. They weigh 14 ounces, which is pretty light. They retail for a wonderful $7.99, and you guessed it, they're made in China. So now let's go over the information we can gather about this boot before we cut it in half, starting with the leather. So it looks like it's just a really thin layer of suede glued to a foam backer. And I think that's how they get away with calling it suede. And I guess we'll see a little bit more when we actually cut it in half. But that's the problem with Amazon and some of these other things, is they are very loose and fast with their definitions of what materials are being used, and it's kind of obnoxious. But I actually kind of like the color of this suede. It kind of reminds me of a CF Stead suede. It's kind of got that mustardy, light brown color. So if it was real leather, like a nice leather, I'd actually like the color of this boot a lot. The lining is just a fake leather. You know, it's like a polyurethane coated foam with what looks like a little bit of a fabric reinforcement. And it's got a fake print on the inside, and you can always tell a fake leather because that pour print they put into it is always super consistent, and you can see the pattern repeating over and over. And the fake leather never lasts as long because fake leather doesn't have that natural fiber structure that you see in leather. It's a lot of times it's just foam that is really fragile with a little bit of fabric that helps reinforce it, but it's just never as durable as real leather. And then onto the construction. So it's got a little fake welt on it that's just into this rubber outsole, but I'm willing to bet that it's just cemented construction. I really just want to tear the sole off because I know I could tear it off, but I'm saving it till after I cut it in half. So it's just a cemented construction, which will never really last very long, especially if it's a cheap cemented construction. Moving to the other features of this boot. So it's got a zipper on the side of the boot. And if you've seen this channel, you know I hate zippers on boots 99% of the time. Occasionally, there's a reason for a zipper, but this is not that occasion because this boot has speed hooks and eyelets, which make it easier to put on. And they still put a zipper on it. And it's just a cheap zipper. It's not like a YKK zipper. It's just a really cheap zipper, which is obvious for $7.99 because a YKK zipper costs about $7.99. And then to the outsole, and this is the really, really interesting thing about this boot that I did not expect I would see on this. So if you look at this outsole, you can see it's got kind of a little felt layer on top. And if you've ever owned a pair of Converse, that might look familiar to you because Converse has the same little felt layer. And you might know this already, but Converse puts that felt layer on their shoes so that they can be classified as slippers. So when they import them, it's a lower import fee because they're not importing shoes, they're importing slippers. So anytime you see this on a really cheap shoe or boot or anything, it's to get around that tariff and those taxes associated with importing shoes. So technically, by the importer's standard, this is not even a boot, this is technically a slipper. And so that's part of the reason why you're able to sell a boot on Amazon Prime for $7.99, because first of all, it's clearly a cheap boot, but also because they imported it and got around that loophole of classifying these as slippers. I don't know that for sure, but I'm willing to bet it's classified as a slipper. And then on to the fit, feel, and look of these shoes. Like I said, I don't think they look that bad. I kind of like the color of them for a suede looking boot. They don't look bad, aside from the fact that you can clearly tell that it's like a fake welt and it's just a cheap outsole. And I actually have these pair. I don't even know if you can see them. I've been wearing these pair around. A slightly different style because I wanted to wear them for a few days just to kind of see how they wore. And even even wearing these ones around for the B-roll shots of us wearing them, you can see how badly they're creased. And that's after like 5 or 6 steps. So these ones that I have on, I don't know why I didn't take these off before filming. Let me take them off real quick. So with these ones that I've been wearing for 2 days, you can see that these are really beat up. You know, for 2 days of wear, you would assume that I wore these for a year. Maybe not a year, but you get the point. And what I'll do is before this video posts, I'm gonna keep wearing these, and then right before it posts, I'll take a photo or a video and insert it here so you can see how they look after a week worth of wear. They're comfortable right off the bat, but after a few days, you can start to feel some of the flaws under your foot. You know, I'm willing to bet there's some structure in here that makes these pretty uncomfortable once they're actually broken in. So now, well, they're not gonna cut these in half. Let's cut these in half, see what's inside of them, and see how you can get this boot for $7.99 after we talk about our sponsor, Sheath. Sheath is the underwear that has 3 individual compartments to keep your rice and beans comfortable and cool, to keep your meat and cheese from sticking together, to keep the general and his men from fighting, to keep your Joey in your pouch, to keep your disco ball spinning, to keep your flapjack from sticking to the pan. That's so gross.
That one's really good.
To keep your worm off the hook, to keep your kittens clean, to keep your John Denver out of the Rockies, to keep you from getting kicked out of yoga class, to take back LeBron from the heat, to keep your pickles out of the mason jar, to keep your scrote goat out of the moat. So traditional boxer briefs are pretty barbaric, if we're being honest. They were invented during the Neanderthal era. Sheath, on the other hand, is a pretty modern ergonomic design intended to prevent skin-on-skin contact for long durations, which can build up heat and sweat. Sheath prevents all of that. And they were invented by a US Army soldier who came up with the idea of Sheath during his second tour in Iraq, where it's super hot and his boys needed to breathe. And so he experimented with a bunch of different designs and different ways of separating his boys, and finally came up with this design, and it works pretty well. You know, I had everyone in the shop try them out, and it does take a little bit of getting used to, but I could see the value on a hot, sweaty day having everything separated. So click the link below and use the code ROSEANVIL at checkout, or go to sheathunderwear.com/RoseAnvil for 20% off, and treat your meat and 2 veg. It's worth a try. All right, we got this catastrophe cut in half. Let's see what's inside. Very tricky. This is kind of interesting because I thought for sure it was a really thin layer of like suede that was gonna be really fragile, but it's not even a layer of leather. It's actually flocked leather, where they take a really fine powder of leather and they sprinkle it on top of this material with an adhesive that sticks to it, and it's called flocking. So this is flocked leather, and this is the first time I've actually ever seen it, because usually you see flocking on Christmas trees or like inside of cabinets where that like the like suede feel, but I've never seen it on a boot. That is super interesting and very tricky, and that's kind of where this whole like leather terms has been corrupted over time, because genuine leather used to mean genuine. People get mad at me when I say genuine. Genuine leather used to mean like this is a real piece of leather, but through the internet and importing things, people kind of use that term to describe anything that has any sort of leather particle in it. And so that can mean anything from a flocked leather upper that's mostly foam and adhesive and other junk, to a high quality, I don't know, like Whites or Nicks or any of these high quality brands. And so a lot of times when you just see a descriptor of genuine leather and you don't see like a top grain or a full grain descriptor, it's a little bit of a gamble. But it doesn't always mean it's a bad leather either, because genuine could, like I said, could mean high quality leather. Like Red Wing still uses a genuine leather stamp on the insole of their boots. It's tricky. And you just gotta watch out for it. And I have a whole video about it, and I'll put it here and in the description. But that's so crazy. I never thought that, I didn't even know you could flock leather. That's wild. Even though this is like 90% foam and man-made materials, they still get away with it by calling it, they still get away with calling it leather by just the simple fact that there's this teeny sprinkling of leather on top. So that's a big part of the reason why they can sell this for $7.99, because there's just leather dust. It's not even a piece of leather. So now let's quickly go through the layers and kind of identify why this boot is so cheap. Starting with the outsole. So it's just a cheap rubber outsole, and you can see it's got a lot of voids in it and a lot of air bubbles in it. And then just these big voids in general are usually not a great sign, because they're just cutting down on the material used to make this outsole. Like, some voids are okay, but this big of voids are usually a bad sign, especially at the forefront of the foot. And I can actually feel these ridges in the boots that I'm currently wearing, because this cheap, like, it's almost like a thick paper for the elasting board is so weak that your foot really compresses that into these little valleys within a few days. Then above that is the shank, and shanks are not all the same shanks, because a high quality shank, like this triple rib shank that you see in Red Wing boots, you cannot bend this with your bare hands. It's really tough. It's a tempered steel. This is just a mild steel, cheap steel that you can literally just bend with your hands. See, this is it before, and this is it after. Not a great sign. That was literally just a little bit of pressure. So it's only a few days worth of wear, and that's just gonna be bent up and out of shape and actually cause more pain than if it didn't have a shank in it to begin with. Then above that, you've got some compressed cardboard, some foam above that, and then the insole is actually made out of the same material that the lining leather is made out of. Then above that, we've got this fake flesh out leather counter cover, a really brittle plastic counter, and then we got some lining material. It's just like a kind of a knit fabric for the vamp lining. And then the flocked leather upper, like we talked about. And the funny thing about this fake leather is there is good fake leather, like those vegan Doc Martens were surprisingly strong, but that was like kind of a felted material. This is literally just craft foam with a layer of PU on top, polyurethane, and like a little bit of fabric. So it just makes it super brittle, and that's why on this shoe that I'm wearing, I shouldn't have put these back on. You can see how fast these things are creased. Like, it's wild, and I'm willing to bet by the time this video airs that will have worn through at some point, because those grooves look like a boot that you've worn for hundreds of miles. So now let's get to the pros and cons. So pros, it's $7. Cons, literally everything about this boot. There's nothing really good about this boot. The only material that you would see in a normal shoe or boot would be this compressed cardboard. And there's really no way to tell if it's any quality. I guess we can do a little quick bend test, and it does break pretty easily, so it's pretty cheap compressed cardboard at that. So we can kind of see now, like, why someone could make a little bit of money off of a boot for $7.99, because these materials are about as cheap as you can find and still make something considered a boot, or in this case, a slipper. And some people have a little bit of problem when I tear apart these boots, because my idea is, like, if I cut this apart, I'm gonna convince a couple people out there, a few people, to not buy this boot. And that helps cut down on the fast fashion and the waste. At least that's what I'm hoping. And just by exposing the junk that you're getting and how fast it's gonna wear out, and hopefully pushing people towards better boots. And if you only have $7.99 to spend on a pair of boots, go to a thrift store. You can find a lot of decent boots for less than $7.99 at a thrift store, and they're gonna last you a lot longer. They may not look as good when you first get them, but as you can see from these boots, I had to take off 4 times. Within a few days, they look like garbage anyway. So go to a thrift store, get a better pair of boots, and the thrift store boots are gonna last longer. Like, I guarantee, I haven't ripped this yet. I guarantee I can just rip this apart. Oh. You can't do that with a decent boot. There's no way. So, buy a decent boot. This will end up in the landfill within, honestly, probably 2 or 3 weeks of daily wear. And hopefully you learned something from this. I think I learned something. I didn't even know you could flock leather. That's crazy to me. And hopefully you stay away from some of these cheaper boots, because boots are really one of those things where 99% of the time you get what you pay for. If you buy $7.99 of a boot, you're gonna get $7.99 worth of a boot. And another thing I hate while I was trying to put this boot back on, they have the tiniest little pull tabs. I can't even fit my pinky in there. This is useless. Just like, who thought this was a good idea? It's terrible. Makes it so hard to put on. Stay away from these at all costs. These are bad. So hopefully you enjoyed this video and hopefully you learned a little bit of something. I definitely did. And stay away from these boots. They're terrible. And thank you guys so much for everything you do and supporting this channel, supporting the video, and supporting my business. It means a lot to me. These fun videos wouldn't be possible without your guys' support, so thank you. And I think, I can't decide if I want to tear these apart. Maybe I'll add a little cutting footage right here to show you guys what's inside a pair of these that was worn for 5 days. So thank you guys. See ya.